Thank you. Good morning and buenos dias. I am honored to participate in this summit of women judges and prosecutors from around the world to discuss ways to combat human trafficking and organized crime. I consider you all my sisters in the law. I want to thank the Pontifical Academy of Sciences for hosting this summit and for convening us here today so that we can tackle one of the defining human rights and access to justice issues of the 21st century. I also want to thank His Holiness, Pope Francis, for his vision, empathy, and resolve in combating human trafficking in all shapes and forms, and for making this important topic a top priority for his papacy. Pope Francis is a true visionary and human rights defender and has demonstrated boundless love and compassion for everyone. With my time today, I would like to discuss the role and importance of judicial leadership in ensuring access to justice for victims of human trafficking. And although we recognize that human trafficking is a global issue, it is an issue that affects each of us and our countries. It is an issue that affects victims in the United States each and every day. But with my time this morning, I would like to address and focus on some specific initiatives in the District of Columbia courts and in our jurisdiction. Washington, D.C., as you know, is the capital of the United States, a jurisdiction of approximately 700,000 residents. Our courts have taken a leadership role partnering with various other stakeholders in the criminal justice system to specifically address and get at the heart of this wrenching and dehumanizing undertaking, which is commercially exploiting for sexual purposes children. Our courts work collaboratively with our local prosecutor's office. And in the District of Columbia, we work both with the federal prosecutor of the United States as well as our local prosecutor and our local police force. Victims of human trafficking either are from the District of Columbia or are being transported through the District of Columbia on their way to other locations within the United States for both labor and sexual exploitation. The fact that human trafficking occurs in the hub of our nation's capital shocks many of our residents who believe that human trafficking is something that occurs somewhere else in other countries, but not in our country. They are mistaken. Recent statistics show that in Washington, D.C. alone, the sex trafficking market is worth over $100 million and continues to rise. Many factors contribute to the District of Columbia's human trafficking problem. Washington, D.C. is a major international destination, yet it has high levels of poverty and is a gateway to markets for trafficking victims where there is a heavy demand in other cities, such as New York City. In 2016, there were 84 confirmed cases of human trafficking in Washington, D.C., along with 100 to 200 cases in our neighboring state of Maryland and over 200 cases in our neighboring state of Virginia. This is just 3 of our 52 states. 50 states, I should know that. Most of these cases relate to sex trafficking. To combat this growing human trafficking problem, the District of Columbia judges and our courts and our local government agencies have established a human trafficking initiative and task force. We've instituted, under the leadership of our judges and our courts, training for our judges to aid our judges in recognizing the link between modern-day human trafficking and other vulnerable populations who appear in our court system every day. Often the cases are not labeled as human trafficking cases. For example, an individual who is being prosecuted for prostitution may well be a victim of trafficking herself. It is up to judges and our courts to begin to recognize some of the symptoms and signals so that they do not re-victimize human trafficking victims in the criminal justice system. Similarly, a victim of domestic violence who appears in court may also be a human trafficking victim. Again, special training for our judges aids the judges in recognizing some of these telltale signs. The same is true for the prosecution of traffickers. Traffickers are more likely to be charged with very minor offenses, for example, violating an administrative code, such as a labor violation in a local restaurant that prosecutes victims of human trafficking. Another common labor violation might be a nail salon or a hair salon where trafficking victims are harbored and persecuted. Also, massage parlors where sex trafficking victims are victimized and harbored. To this end, the family court of our local court system, which handles criminal cases involving juveniles, established a multidisciplinary task force of justice system stakeholders to address the sexual exploitation of court-involved youth and those at risk of being trafficked. Some of the stakeholders in this task force, which is led and convened by the judges of our local courts, include the local social services center, the Office of the Attorney General, the Child and Family Service Agency, which aids children in foster care, the Department of Behavioral Health, and the Department of Youth Rehabilitation, and also the Metropolitan Police Department, along with other local charitable organizations. One of the first accomplishments of this new task force was the creation of a multidisciplinary protocol for addressing commercially sexually exploited children. This document seeks to ensure that children that are trafficked or at risk of being trafficked are effectively identified, monitored, and directed to appropriate services. The protocol seeks to formalize the sharing of information between law enforcement, the prosecutor's office, the courts, and court service agencies to ensure that sexually trafficked and at-risk children do not fall through the cracks of the justice system. The task force's ultimate goal is to create within the District of Columbia courts a new specialized division of the court focused on identifying commercially sexually exploited children and providing supervision and support. The basis for the District of Columbia Court's new initiative, which we have called HOPE, which stands for Hear, Opportunities, Prepare You for Excellence, is largely based on a model of the Los Angeles court system called STAR, Succeeding Through Achievement and Resilience. These models have been met with success in preventing sex trafficking of minors. We expect to initiate Project HOPE in our court in January of 2018. In addition, the family court has also sought to emphasize human trafficking issues and provide education for our judges and local stakeholders through educational programs. In October of 2017, the family court held its annual interdisciplinary conference on human sex trafficking, entitled The Commercial Sexual Exploitation of Children, Recognizing, Understanding, and Addressing the Problem. In July of 2017, the National Center for Juvenile and Family Court Judges held a training program in Washington, D.C. to coordinate with our family court. The success of the Hope Court and other initiatives designed to tackle human trafficking depends on the successful collaboration of governments, courts, and non-government agencies, but mostly on the importance of judicial leadership on this important issue. Other initiatives in Washington, D.C. include a federal task force established called the Human Trafficking Task Force to increase prosecution of traffickers while identifying and serving the victims of trafficking. This task force also includes our local law enforcement agencies, the courts, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and the Civil Rights Division of our Department of Justice. Additionally, the Office of the Attorney General has implemented a human trafficking initiative designed to educate the public. Our mayor's office in the District of Columbia has announced a public awareness campaign designed to raise awareness both in local elementary, high school, and other community organizations. The public's understanding of human trafficking is critical. For example, recently in the United States, on an airline flight from Seattle, Washington to San Francisco, a flight attendant was able to identify a victim of human trafficking and was able to help her in being rescued by contacting law enforcement. As Chief Judge of the District of Columbia Court of Appeals and head of our DC courts, I fully support the establishment of the Hope Court and the multidisciplinary protocols that we have instituted for identifying and assisting victims of human trafficking. I welcome the delegates here and from around the world to come and visit Washington, D.C., and to see how our Human Trafficking Task Force is working so that we may share ideas with you and learn from you about ideas that are working in your countries, in your jurisdictions. Human trafficking is a global issue that requires all of our attention. In addition to the work of our DC courts, I must also highlight the critical work on human trafficking of non-governmental organizations, such as our U.S. National Association of Women Judges, which I served as a former president of, and the International Association of Women Judges, which have conducted training year after year on the importance of human trafficking. Again, I am very pleased to participate in this important conference, and I look forward to engaging with each of you and learning more from you so that we can share our ideas and best practices to address and combat this critical problem. As I close, I would like to say that while human trafficking is modern-day slavery, slavery is not new. And as my ancestors were the descendants of slavery in another form, the African slave trade that impacted the Americas, we must fight to ensure that this problem goes away. And while Lady Justice is often depicted as wearing a blindfold and the scales of justice, some depictions show her also carrying the sword of truth. So there's power in our role as women judges, and judicial leadership is critical. Thank you for allowing me to share my remarks with you today.